Again, great to see everybody this morning. If we haven't met, my name's Terry Smith. I'm the lead pastor here at the Life Christian Church. So glad all of you are here. We had a great 9 a.m., strong crowd, excited people. I always expect the 11 o'clock to step it up a little. So I'm looking forward to our time together this next little while. So, as most of you are aware, today is the third and final week of our Who's Next project, vision cast, and giving opportunities. If you haven't yet received a brochure about our Who's Next project, our hosts are going to offer those to you now. If you haven't received it, just let them know that. And I think somebody's going to be walking up into the risers here as well, please. And thank you so much. And this way, if I'm really boring, you can just read the brochure. But really, you can look through it and kind of get a little sense as to what's going on if some of this is new to you, although we've been messaging around this quite a bit the last few weeks here at TLCC. And I think it's important to say, first of all, we're very excited about this Sunday and the opportunity that we're offering for our TLCC family to contribute towards this Who's Next project. And I'm also very excited about turning the page and next Sunday really beginning to focus on the Lenten season and beginning to teach our way up to Good Friday and Easter. This is a really, really wonderful season. So I'm excited about what we're doing today, and I'm really excited about turning the page and moving forward in another more kind of normal way, I guess, next week. So as I've approached this very important day, I've been thinking about three things that connects this series and vision emphasis with our 2025 Trimester 1 spiritual growth theme, which is, the spiritual growth theme is focused on the idea of magnanimity. These three things, and what I want to talk about today, are big hearts, who's next generosity, and legacy. I've organized today's message accordingly. It's pretty straightforward. 3 thoughts on who's next magnanimity. Everybody please say magnanimity. I know you were wanting to say that with me to see if you could say it. I wonder every time as I start to say it if I'm going to get it out. But nonetheless, let's talk about 3 thoughts on who's next magnanimity. The first one is big hearts and what's in it for me. Big hearts and what's in it for me. So we began this year, first Sunday that I taught in January, describing magnanimity as greatness of spirit. One synonym for magnanimous is great-hearted, which is to say that a magnanimous person has a really big heart. And we offered Jesus as the ultimate example of a magnanimous person. He had a heart big enough to care for the whole world and to give his life for the whole world. This is not only demonstrated in the way that he died and what or who he died for, but also in the way he lived and how he taught us to live. A marvelous example of this, how he taught us to live in ways that demonstrate great-heartedness in particular, is found in the Gospel of Luke, in Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount. Luke chapter 6 records part of this very famous sermon where Jesus said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Now, it's important to note, and I think that this should be the emphasis, that Jesus said that we're supposed to do this without expecting anything in return. However, he then shifts his comments a little bit to then say, but even though you're going to do this without expecting anything in return, this is what is going to happen to you. He says, and it continues here, Luke 6:37, do not judge, and you will not be judged. We're talking about reciprocity now. This is the way people and things will respond to us when we live magnanimously, when we live in this great-hearted way. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, to the degree that you choose to live this way, it will be measured to you. So, Jesus called us to an exceptional generosity of spirit. He called us to a high-minded, open-handed, wholehearted benevolence in our approach to people and life in every imaginable way. And he set the standard for this so high that we can only live this way if he helps us, which I think is part of the point. He set the standard so high that none of us could even begin, in fact, in some cases, to even want to live this way, unless he changes our heart and through his Spirit helps us actually live the change in our heart out in our daily lives. This entire passage, the Sermon on the Mount, which I just read part of it, and again, this is Luke's version of this entire passage is, in my mind, about generosity of spirit. Generosity is shown in many ways. When I think of a generous person, I think of a person who is not petty. I think of someone who is unselfish, genuinely altruistic, actively concerned for the welfare of others. I think of someone who is lavish in their affection for those they love and who has a heart big enough to love a lot of people. I think of someone who is extravagant in their praise of others, who finds every possible good in every person that they meet. I think of someone who's quick to forgive. I think about someone who's generous, even and especially to those who may have hurt them. A person who has this generosity of spirit always sees possibilities and potential and opportunity in spite of present circumstances. They are magnanimous. I like to describe this kind of person as someone who is big inside. I love that. They're big. They're big inside. Jesus taught us that though this shouldn't be our focus, that we should live this way without expecting anything back. I mean, we don't say, I'm going to be quick to forgive because I want people to forgive me. Really, our heart should just be quick to forgive. But whereas Jesus said the focus should be on doing this right and really big thing in spite of what may or may not come back, the fact is that this comes back to us in ways that represent the same amount that we gave it out. Either whether we did this in a big way or we did this in a small way, these things return back to us. I love the Message translation of this particular passage. Here's part of it. These are the words of Jesus. You have to hear this, guys, as the words of Jesus. Live generously. You'll never, I promise, regret it. Live out this God-created identity the way our Father lives towards us, generously and graciously, even when we're at our worst. Our Father is kind, you be kind. Don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want the same treatment. Be easy on people. This is what Jesus said. Be easy on people. You'll find life a lot easier. Give away your life. You'll find life given back, but not merely given back with bonus and blessing. Jesus said, giving, not getting, is the way. generosity begets generosity. So, I find it fascinating that Jesus said that a person who gives their life away always gets more back. And I'm tempted today with the task that I'm responsible to deliver on today. I'm tempted to focus on that part of the message, that if you give, it'll come back. But I think all of us know intuitively that part of what makes a big-hearted person is that they do not give their life away hoping to get something back. A magnanimous person is not transactional. Hear me. In a world full of, unmagnanimous, which may or may not be a word, leaders and people, it's important sometimes to remember that magnanimous people are not transactional. It's not I do for you so you do for me. It's I do for you because I want to do for you, because it's in my heart to do for you, because that's how Jesus taught me to live. Anyway, a magnanimous person lives generously in this world because they have big hearts. The fact that good things come back to us if we live this way is as Jesus said, bonus and blessing. Jesus literally gave his life. And because he did this, we're told in Scripture, he now reigns over the universe. But that's not why he gave. He gave because he loved the world. He gave because he loved us. He gave because he had, if you please, a really, really big heart. Now, please note this teaching from Jesus in the Gospel of Luke about generosity is about much more than giving finances. I mean, sometimes it seems the focus is on that last part, given it will be given to you, and it's always seems to be applied to, you read that when you're going to receive an offering. But really, you have to read the whole context. It's about this generous approach to life. And it's important that we acknowledge that that's what Jesus is talking about today. Today, however, as most of you are aware, we're planning to receive pledges for our Who's Next project. And one of the things that I like about this particular vision and giving opportunity is that it calls us to have a big heart, to not focus on ourselves, but to focus beyond ourselves. This vision is calling us to think about who's next, to think about the next generation, to think about the next person to hear the gospel. Now, let me just tell you that something I think about a lot and make application about it today. And I say this in part because I want you to know the way that I think as I approach you guys every week. When leaders who care about those who they serve are preparing to communicate, and especially when they're planning to make what we might call a big ask, they will often ask the well-known WIFM question. WIFM, you probably are aware, is an acronym for What's in it for me, which is to say that I'm not up here thinking what's in it for me, I'm thinking about what's in it for you, and I have an assumption, it's only human, that most people are sitting there, whether consciously, probably actually subconsciously, asking the question at some point, if you're listening to somebody talk for 45 minutes, what's in it for me? What does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with my life? What does this have to do? How does this benefit me? And to a certain extent, that's not a bad thing. That's a human thing. That's a normal thing. And I think about this, just so you know, when I'm preparing a sermon week after week, I'm thinking about you sitting there asking the question, what's in it for me? And at some point, I try to answer that question. It's important to me. I care about that. I care about what's in it for you. I am here to serve you. I am here to inspire you to the life God dreams for you. So I care about the WIFM question a lot. But having said that, let me say that today, my answer to that assumed and very human question is this. What's in it for you today is that it is not about you. What's in it for you today is that you have the opportunity to grow your heart bigger. You have the opportunity to be involved in something bigger than yourself. You have the opportunity to give expecting nothing in return. And as a pastor who cares about the people he serves, there are times when we need to not focus on what's in it for us, but on what we can do for others. Now, inevitably, as Jesus taught us, life responds generously to generous people. And more importantly, you can't avoid this in Scripture, and it's good news. God promises to bless generous people. But that's not our focus today. Our focus is not what is in it for us. Our focus is on who is next. Now, look, most of us who are part of TLCC will benefit from the Who's Next and What's Next initiatives we've discussed the last couple of weeks. Our children and grandchildren will benefit from the family ministry we're growing and the children and youth facilities that we're building. Many of us will benefit from sitting in newly designed adult learning spaces and growing in our faith there. We will benefit, maybe more than any other way, by developing life-impacting relationships with the next generation of believers who will say yes to the gospel and become a part of our TLCC community. One beautiful thing about a growing church that's preaching the gospel is you're always welcoming new people in. And what happens is those people impact our lives in powerful ways. There are a whole lot of people who are not yet a part of the Life Christian Church who someday will be, who are going to make a positive impact in our lives. The fact is that we will benefit in these ways, but today that's not the point. I'm reminded of a mentor of mine, a pastor from Dallas, Texas, who was raised in the country in Texas. And this man's name is Jack Dehart. Jack Dehart is father-in-law to Dan Dean, who many of you will remember here as a part of our TLCC extended church family. Well, Pastor Dehart was a legendary pastor and a great man. And again, I would go out to eat with him as a young guy, and I'd take a notebook with me, and I'd just take notes. We'd be sitting there having dinner, and I just keep picking the notebook up and taking notes. Anyway, remember a story someone told me about him, and that was how when he was a guy, let's say about my age, 43, early 60s, they had an event at their church that was centered on reaching young people. And, we're going back now, let's say we're going back 35 years, 40 years maybe. And the style of music that was being played at this event to attract young people was an edgy, even controversial, very youth-oriented style of music. And Pastor Dehart, he's a gray-headed guy who's been around a long time, and he was well known for his love of country music and a particular form of gospel music called Southern gospel music, not gospel music, but Southern gospel, which means old quartet music that was very prominent in the South in that era. So most of you probably have never even heard that kind of music before, but nonetheless, Jack Dehart was well known to love that kind of music. So they're at this youth event, and the kids are just going crazy over this music that even was controversial in the church at that time. Wouldn't be so much now, but was then. And somebody looked around a little nervous about what Pastor Dehart would be doing, and he was out in the aisle dancing with the young people. And somebody came up to him and they said, "Pastor Dehart, I thought you hated this kind of music." He said, "Oh, I hate this music." He's dancing. He said, "I hate this music. I loathe this music. But," he said, and he pointed to young people, "I love them." And when I heard that story, it impacted really the way that I think about a lot of things, where I try to remember that it's not always about me. It's not always about what I like, especially as a leader. It's about the person I'm trying to reach. It's about the person I'm trying to serve. It's about becoming all things to all people so that by some means you might reach somebody somewhere. When it comes to the young people and what they do that they enjoy, who cares if I enjoy it? What a terrible thing to consider. It's about them. But it's hard for most of us, if we're frank, to not have a certain constant attunement to do I like this? How does this benefit me? And I always appreciated the magnanimity of Pastor Dehart in that moment. I hate this music, but I love them, as opposed to another friend of mine, a peer of mine, who is a great guy, very gregarious, very loquacious, which are really nice words to say. He has a really big personality, and he talks a lot, and he tends to, in an endearing way, he's a great guy, talk a lot about himself. And because he has this big personality, if you're at a table with 5 or 6 people, my friend, and again, I want to stress, because he watches online sometimes, I love him. My friend can tend to dominate the conversations with a string of stories, good stories, about himself. But he's self-aware enough, or else his wife's kicked him under the table enough, I'm not sure, that at some point he'll realize he's sucking out all the oxygen in the room, and that it's all about him, and all of a sudden he'll stop, and he'll smile, and he'll say, enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think about me? Anyway, I'm going to say it again because you're going to want to repeat that later. Some of you at the dinner table today. Enough about me. What about you? What do you think about me? Anyway, if we're not careful, you get the point, don't you? You say, please, we got the point. If we're not careful, it's all about us, which brings me back to the theme passage of Scripture that's informing our Who's Next project. It's that story about the king Hezekiah in about 700 BC, to whom the prophet Isaiah went. And the prophet Isaiah said, Hezekiah, I've got news for you. And the news is that as long as you're alive, everything's going to go really great for you and your kingdom. But your children are going to be conquered by the Babylonians, taken into captive, and they're going to suffer terrible things. And he enumerates some of the things that are going to suffer. I tell you what they are, but I wouldn't speak about some of them publicly. They're that bad. And Hezekiah's response to that, 2 Kings chapter 20, was to say, the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good. There will be peace and security during my lifetime. And Hezekiah wasn't an all-bad person. He did a lot of great things. But in the end, he messed up his legacy because he didn't think about his legacy. He said it's good as long as it's good for me, but Hezekiah did not think about who's next, even his own children. Now, Hezekiah was the 13th successor to King David, the second king of Judah and Israel. And King David, as opposed to Hezekiah, at least in this context, was famous for his really big heart. David didn't have a perfect heart, but David had a big heart. And this is demonstrated in what God said about him. Acts chapter 13, God testified concerning him, I have found David a man after my own heart. He will do everything I want to do. So we've been telling this negative story about Hezekiah who didn't care about who's next. Let me spend a few minutes around a positive story around the big-hearted King David and how he cared about the next generation, those who were to follow him. Here's my second thought today. Let's talk about magnanimity and who's next generosity. Magnanimity and who's next generosity. So, you'll be aware, at least most of you, that David, when he became king of Israel, desperately wanted to build a majestic temple for God. And God told him no. Now, the reason God told him no is actually quite complicated. I've done some long sermons on this around here because it's really a beautiful story, but it takes time to explain that I won't take time today, except to say that God essentially said to David, David, I would rather have you model the kingdom that's going to come through your son Jesus than to build this physical temple. And he said to David, David, your son Solomon is going to build a physical kingdom, and your son David is going to build the everlasting kingdom. Now, David, when he explained what God said to him, actually explained it in a different way, but that was what was going on here. It seems that David didn't fully understand the magnitude of the positive reason God didn't want him to build the temple. And, God essentially said to David, no, not yet, not like this. And David must have been crushed because he wasn't going to get to build this temple for God. But the way that he responded to this immense disappointment was by directing his energies toward ensuring the success of the next generation. He decided that he was going to help his son and successor, Solomon, build the temple that he, David, had hoped to build. And David did several things that I want to talk through for the next couple of minutes to secure success for the next generation. So Hezekiah said, as long as it's good for me, I don't care about who's next. David said, I'm a little disappointed about what I'm able or not able to do, but I'm going to focus my attention now on who's next. And so here are some of the things that David did to secure the future of the next generation as it concerns specifically his desire to build a temple. First of all, David purchased the property for the temple and made certain that what he paid for it represented a sacrifice. It's a wonderful story. I don't have time to dig into any of these today. Suffice it to say that David goes to a guy who owns a certain piece of property, and David said, I want to buy this property and I want to build God a temple here. And the guy says, you're the king, I'm your loyal subject, I don't want you to buy the property, I'll give you the property. To which David responds, I insist on paying the full price. I will not take for the Lord what is yours or sacrifice a burnt offering that cost me nothing. Then David said, the house of the Lord is to be here. I just love this. Guys, today, frankly, there are a lot of life lessons that it would be good for us to apply to our lives. Here's another one of those life lessons. It's David saying, I want to do something for God, and I want it to cost me something. I don't want it to be easy. I want to have to pay for it. Anyway. And then he made extensive preparations to design and build the temple he was not allowed to build. A lot of people don't know this. David is the one who designed the temple of Solomon. And not only did he design the temple of Solomon, but he also went and found an extravagant amount of natural resources, by which I mean building materials, in order to build the temple. And there's actually a lot that's said about this in Scripture. 1 Chronicles 22, David said, my son Solomon is young and inexperienced, and the house to be built for the Lord should be of great magnificence and fame and splendor in the sight of all the nations. I love that. He's not thinking small. Let's go build some little barn over here, put an ugly sign out front. He says, no, the house is built for the Lord should be of great magnificence and fame and splendor. Therefore, David said, I will make preparations for it. So he made extensive preparations before his death. What is he doing before he dies? Actually, he gives years of his life to this. He's making preparations for what God has called the next generation to do. Next, he gave and received an offering to raise the capital needed to fund this building project. This is really wonderful. 1 Chronicles 29, King David said to the whole assembly, because this palatial structure, the temple, is not for man but for the Lord God, with all my resources I have provided for the temple of my God. In my devotion to the temple of God, I now give my personal treasures of gold and silver for the temple of my God, over and above everything I have provided for this holy temple. He's already gone all over that part of the world and gathered the most beautiful natural materials that are going to be used to build the temple. Now, out of his own wealth, he gives. Out of his bank account, out of his stock account, out of his maybe crypto account, I don't know, whatever. He says, and on top of all that I've already done, out of my own resources, this is what I'm doing. And then he says to the people, now, who is willing to consecrate themselves to the Lord today? He's not going to just do this himself. He's going to invite the people into it. He's going to give them an opportunity to have big hearts as well. Now, who is willing to consecrate themselves to the Lord today? Then the leaders of families, the officers of the tribes of Israel, the commanders of thousands, and the commanders of hundreds, and the officials in charge of the king's work gave willingly. This is something that we've tried to practice when we've attempted to raise capital for a thing. Sharon and I always give first, or announce what we're giving to some extent first, because I want you to know that as the leader, I'm not just in, I'm in big. And then we typically ask a group of leaders to give. I'm going to refer back to this in a few moments. And then hopefully then everybody's encouraged and given an opportunity to be involved. And what we're told here is the people rejoiced at the willing response of their leaders, for they had given freely and wholeheartedly to the Lord. David the king also rejoiced greatly. And then finally on this, before I move to my next point, David then prayed a prayer that modeled magnanimous giving and that has inspired generosity for many generations. Guys, if you were going to choose one text to describe what biblical stewardship looks like, the prayer that David prayed at the receiving of this massive offering to build the Temple of Solomon is a beautiful picture of biblical stewardship. Here is prayer. 1 Chronicles 29. David praised the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly, saying, "Praise be to you, Lord, the God of our father Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor. For everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. Wealth and honor come from you." And then hear this. This is beautiful. Now, they've just received an offering. The offering is so large. You know, people weren't giving online, right? They're bringing their jewelry. They're bringing things from their household of value, gold or silver or whatever that's going to be melted down. And okay? And what's happened is there's a small mountain of now gifts that people are bringing. And David's standing there praying in the reception of this offering. And hear what he says. "But who am I? And who are my people that we should be able to give as generously as this? Everything comes from you, and we have given you only what comes from your hand." So beautiful. Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a temple for your holy name comes from your hand, and all of it belongs to you. I know, my God, that you test the heart. You want to know what our motivation is in this, and are pleased with integrity. All these things I have given willingly and with honest intent, and now I have seen with joy how willingly your people who are here have given to you. So, all of this is happening for David's son to build a temple. Has anybody ever heard of the Temple of Solomon? No. I'm sorry. Yes, of course, you're nodding your head saying no. What I meant to say was, has anybody ever heard of the Temple of David? No. You've not heard of the Temple of David. You hear of the Tabernacle of David. He had the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord under a tent. But you have heard of the Temple of Solomon. But what most people don't know is David's the one who designed it. David's the one who provided the material resources. David's the one who gave his own resources. David's the one who encouraged the people to give their resources. And so whose temple was it? Well, it was Solomon's temple. But see, to David, it didn't matter. It was God's work, and he was all in for who was next. Which brings me to my third thought today, which is about leaving a who's next legacy. David left a who's next legacy, and the good news is that we can too. And so here's my final thought today. Legacy and who's next generosity. Legacy and who's next generosity. Let me check in on everybody. You guys doing okay? You still awake? You warm enough? Everything's fine? All right. How about everybody over here doing all right? All right, I'm told I look at this side of the room a lot, not that side of the room as much. Truly, my wife gave me a little talk about this last night. And I don't know why I do that. I have no idea. Evidently, it perturbs people online as well. But if you see Sharon, tell her, I'm paying attention. I heard her, and I'm looking. I see I have my back to them. And I'm looking. All right. So, to restate, our vision emphasis for this season at the Life Christian Church is who's next? We are focused on the next generation, meaning our youth and children and generations of children not yet born. We are focused on the next generation of believers, those who have not yet heard or responded to the gospel and who are not yet a part of a life-giving church. And we're focused as well on the next generation of people who we hope will join us in sacrificing for who's next. Many of us have been here for years and have stepped up again and again to do what was needed to be done to build this church and its ministries, and will step up again now. But we are excited to invite a whole new generation of TLCC people to join us in giving generously to this Who's Next project. And we've had some people in a group of leaders we call our gospel patrons who've been making early pledges over the last week or so. And one young couple sent a beautiful email to our Executive Director of Business and Finance, Kevin McCollum. And I'm just going to read a few words from it without kind of exposing who they are. But they sent this email with a generous pledge that they were making towards Who's Next. And here's part of what they wrote that expresses the kind of spirit that I feel from the big-hearted people, both those who've always been here and the new generation of you who've come here in recent years. Here's what this couple wrote. We are extremely grateful to be a part of the TLCC community and see the amazing things that God is doing through this church. We appreciate Pastor Terry's diligent effort to share his vision with the Gospel Patrons community and are excited about the opportunity to partner in accomplishing it. And then they go into some details about the pledge that they're so generously making. And then write, TLCC has been an incredible blessing to us. We've been a part of a life group for about 1 year and also became church members last fall. At this church, we have found the great teaching, thoughtful programming, and a loving community of believers that we had searched for over 2 years prior. We are committed to leaving a legacy for the next generation at TLCC, including, Lord willingly, our own children. This is an example of the kind of people who are stepping up to be a part of a new generation of TLCC people who get it, who have big hearts, and who care not just about what we already have that somebody else sacrificed for, but what we can have and that we have the privilege to sacrifice for. Last week, we detailed some of our ministry vision connected to the Who's Next project, but as most of you know, there's a physical manifestation of this vision as well. I'll speak to it briefly today because I've talked a lot about it the last couple of weeks. You've received brochures in the mail, etc. Most of you have a lot of familiarity with this, but the physical manifestation of kind of the larger vision emphasis is primarily manifested in three things. The first is renovating our first floor, the floor below us, renovating the first floor, space about the size of this room, plus our entire 10,000 square foot K-Port area, renovating the first floor for adult learning and our next generation ministries. And the signature piece of what we're going to do in the first floor is design a beautiful children and youth theater that will seat about 175 children or young people. It will be changed, be able to be changed from children's purposes to youth purposes by innovations like environmental lighting and some other things like that. There's a cafe connected to this for the kids, a large game room and youth hangout area for our young people, and a whole new system that's going to really help us with our K-port check-in processes and so on, be much more hospitable. And then along the edge of that space, we're going to create some adult meeting rooms where we're going to be able to have classrooms to teach adults for adult learning opportunities that, if you were here last week, you heard about us rolling out in months to come. The second major physical manifestation that we're talking about is our cross sculpture. Our cross sculpture is both a work of art, advancing our All In for the Arts initiative, and an invitation to the next generation of believers here at the Life Christian Church. This is going to be a beacon, a 39-foot tall sculpture that's going to be a beacon to everyone in this area. They're going to look here and they're going to, a lot of people, they drive by here. Some of you drove by here for years and you didn't know this was a church. Am I right? How many of you, if you say yes? If that's true, say yes. Because I hear this story all the time. I live in the neighborhood. I drove by all the time. I don't know why. I never saw the sign. I didn't know the sign was connected to that. Well, no one's ever going to wonder anymore, because there's going to be this beautiful cross that's going to be lit up beautifully at night, and it's going to be gorgeous during the day when the sun's shining off of it. And anybody who drives by here is going to know without question, this is a place that's about the cross of Jesus Christ and what Jesus Christ did for us when he died, was buried, and rose again. And then connected to that, in the garden surrounding this cross sculpture, we're going to build our legacy wall and legacy stones. Let me talk about this now for a few minutes in connection to our existing walk of faith. Many of you have probably not been to this corner of the property, but out on this corner of the property is a beautiful area that we call our walk of faith. And in this area are several hundred paving stones inscribed with the names of the people who made the last push to allow us to build this building. I want to tell that story quickly. I introduced the Walk of Faith in June 2012. I think it's important sometimes to connect the stories of the past, what got us here, with what we're doing in the present and the future. It's all one story. I introduced the Walk of Faith in June 2012. At that time, we were meeting in a converted bowling alley off of Main Street here in West Orange. We had an auditorium that would seat about 225 people, and at times we'd have 1,000 people on the weekend in that building. It was crazy. And we didn't have one parking space, and we didn't have nearly enough anyway. We tried to get from there to here a lot sooner than we did, but there was about a 10-year-long process. Anyway, we just finished our third capital campaign to raise the capital needed to build this building here at 747 Northfield Ave, and that campaign raised more than $2.1 million. However, we were still $750,000 short of what we needed to complete the project. The building was underway. We were really close, still $750,000 short. People had given over 3 campaigns millions of dollars over the past 10 years. We'd borrowed all the money that we could borrow. We'd done everything we knew to do. Exhausted. I had a full head of hair before this building project, and we're still $750,000 short. And so I felt inspired to challenge the people to one more act of faith. And this was based on the story in the Old Testament of Joshua finally leading the Israelites in the Promised Land. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, finally, they got there. And at that point, we kind of felt like we've been wandering around in the wilderness. It had been a long, long journey with a lot of sacrifice by a lot of wonderful people. Well, the people, you'll remember, had missed the Promised Land initially because of their lack of faith. But Joshua now calls on a new generation to exercise their faith, the faith to finally walk into God's promises. And when they did, he then built a legacy memorial to commemorate their faith and God's miraculous provision. And here's the story I told and the text I spoke from in June 2012. Joshua 4, 1 through 7. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan." And they did that, and then Joshua took those stones and he built a memorial with it by the Jordan River. And he said later, in the future, when your children ask you, when the next generation asks you, "What do these stones mean?" tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. And so I told that story, and then I told that group of people that day that we were going to build a memorial at 747 to remember their faith and the miracle that we knew God would do. It hadn't yet been fully done, but we knew he was going to do it. And we encouraged the people to give $747, each household, $747, and told them that if they did, that there would be a stone commemorating their gift in perpetuity on this property, the walk of faith. The people stepped up and they gave yet another sacrificial offering. They gave enough for us to be able to finish this building that we're sitting in now. And I hope at some point that you will walk out there and look at the names of that precious group of people, a number of whom are in this room today, and to be grateful for the past generation who made possible what we have here now. Now, here's the invitation. The invitation is we're going to continue this journey, and we're going to have a memorial on this property that everyone who's now a part of this generation of TLCC is going to be a part of. This cross sculpture is going to be erected in the midst of the walk of faith, where the cross is now etched in the ground. Now this 39-foot cross, Lord willing, is going to be standing up in the air, telling the story of the gospel through art. This gives all of us the opportunity to step out in faith again and continue to tell the story of God's grace on TLCC. And just a couple technical things before I give you an opportunity to make a pledge. First of all, in this legacy wall, there are going to be 4 types of stone that represent 4 different levels of giving. I took some time 2 weeks ago to explain why we're doing this way, if you're curious as to why we've chosen to do this. But as much as anything else, it's to ask people who have the capacity to do so to stretch to the next level of giving. Instead of asking everybody, regardless of resources, to give the same amount, we're saying give according to what you feel called to give, but also think about stretching to the next level. To a place where you actually need faith to give. So we're not looking for equal gifts, but we're looking for equal sacrifice. And these 4 levels, the first level of stone will be engraved with one's family name, or perhaps if they want to memorialize someone. The first level of stone is for those who give in this Who's Next project, 1,000 and above. The next level of stone for 5,000 and above. The next level of stone, is it 15, Kevin, or is it 10 and above? 10 and above. And the last level of stone, $25,000 and above. I want to let you know, according to the example that David set, I think the leader should always be the first to say, "I'm in." And I want you to know that Sharon and I, by God's grace, are going to give at the highest level of this legacy wall, and we're excited to be able to do that. I also want to let you know that 17 households who are part of our gospel patrons community have already pledged towards this campaign, and those 17 households have already pledged $338,000, which represents about $20,000 per household. Some gave more, some gave a little less, but I want you to know that the leader is giving, that there are a group of leaders who are giving in a meaningful way, and now I'm asking all of you to join us. Now, of course, if you're new to us, I'm not asking you to worry about any of this at all. What I would ask you is come back next week and give me another chance to do a what's in it for you kind of a message, okay? Because I'm going to be fired up next week, ready to speak in a way that will impact your lives. But to the TLC church family, I want to invite you to come and be involved in this. And I'm not going to say anything more about it than what I've just said. I'm going to invite you to come and be a part of it. Come and be a part of the future of our church. Come and be a part of the legacy that we're creating. Come and be a part of people who care about the whole who's next thing. Guys, in the seat back pocket close to you, there is a pledge card. And I'm going to ask you if you would to grab that. Or if you're on the front rows, I think they're on the front rows. Would you reach out and grab a pledge card right now and let's look at it together? You know, it excites me, particularly at 9 o'clock, for some reason, we had a stronger crowd than usual. And it really excited me because all of our TLCC people knew what we were going to do today. And you know, I've heard pastors who worry about when they do something like this, folks aren't going to show. But it's like at TLCC, it's like people are like, come on, let's go. You know, it's the kind of heart that the people of our church have. And I respect that, and I appreciate that, and I rejoice in that. If you look at the card, the bottom line is, you can look at the card and figure out, bottom line, tell us as much as you can about the size of the pledge you're making, and if you can, when you're planning on giving. And if you don't have those details yet, don't worry about it. I want you to know also, this may sound like a strange thing for a pastor to talk about on a Sunday, but because of the number of questions we've gotten around this, I feel like I need to answer this. We've had some people who are wanting to make large gifts and larger than their income would allow for, but they've asked if they can give stocks. And the answer to that is yes, of course. And I didn't and usually that's very beneficial for people to be able to do in terms of taxes and so on. But on our giving platform online, I didn't even know this was there. But if you'll tick down a little bit from the normal giving stuff, there's always an opportunity there to give stocks and a process that will lead you through how to do that. If you have questions, reach out to Kevin McCollum here at our TLCC office. And also, I didn't know this, you can give crypto, you can give your left leg, you can give all kinds of things on our platform. I'm serious about the crypto part. Well, praise God. Father, I thank you today for the amazing privilege that we have to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. That we get to be a part of this Who's Next legacy. Thank you for calling us to do your work in this world. Thank you for giving us ways to be a part of it. I pray that you'll bless your people as they pledge and as they give over this next year. In Jesus' name, amen. I should also have said the pledge period, the time in which this gift can be given, is until Easter 2026. So a little bit over a year, okay? Would you please stand with me?